First caricature I want to look at is the coon caricature. Just raise your hand. How many people have heard the word coon before? It's pretty common. Now see, with the coon caricature, it portrayed these blacks as lazy, childlike people. You see, this one came about when, this is when you start hearing about black men being called boys and never being called a man. This came about after this caricature was kind of established. Now you see, slave masters didn't do their own work and called individuals forced to work for them lazy. Now, me being who I am, if I'm not being fed properly, if I'm not being housed properly, if I'm not being hydrated properly, I'm gonna feel lazy too. Wouldn't you all agree with that? Exactly. So slaves were punished for not working hard, even though they was working in these terrible conditions. See, the caricature portrayed blacks as not happy with one's own status, but not educated enough to change one's own position. You see, slave masters refused to let blacks get educated. They would penalize them for trying to get educated. But when they weren't educated, they were blamed for not being educated. You see, the black man at this time was always blamed for his own problems. You see, the slave master never took ownership for what he did to the black man, for dehumanizing the black man, for treating the black man like a coon. You see, when we think of coon, what do we think of? You see, the coon portrays blacks as these subhuman creatures that were good for nothing more than eat a watermelon, stealing, or messing up the English language. Now that's like me telling you to stop speaking English and start speaking Spanish, to stop speaking English and start speaking Chinese, to start speaking English and start speaking French. And if you don't get it right the first time, you get penalized. You get lynched. You get lashes across your back. You get strung up from a tree. You get buried alive. See, these are all things that happen, or something so subtle. Now, coon, does anybody here, just raise your hand, know what coon's short for? Raccoon. Pretty simple. Now, when you think of raccoon, what do you think of? Something going through your trash, right? Something messing up something you did, right? This is exactly how they portray blacks. As something going through trash, something evil, something dirty. You see, this was applied to the younger generation because slave masters didn't understand why they didn't want to work. But it's like I mentioned earlier. Would you want to work in those conditions where you're not being housed right? Would you want to work in those conditions where you're not being fed right? Would you want to work in those conditions where you're being penalized for everything you do, whether it be right or wrong? Now, the next caricature I want to talk about is brute caricature. Now, this came about after slavery, so it was around 1870, between 1890. And this portrayed blacks as savages, violent, strong beasts that had no concept of right or wrong. You see, they were hideous, terrifying predators that targeted helpless victims, especially white women. Now think about that. When I talked about the coon caricature, they portrayed blacks as lazy, childlike, when they were slaves. You see, they had masters to take care of them. Master kind of kept them in line. Master kept them in place. No, but when they're free, now they're beasts. Now they're strong. Now they're violent. Now they do harm. Now rape. You see, they had this idea that brutes were raped for no reason. You see, rape was most often mentioned with the connection of the black brute, and claims that blacks were raping white women in epidemic numbers. See, this was a control mechanism. You see, what was innocent at this time in America? The most purest thing in American society or American history at this time was a white woman. This is a fact. We all know that they always wanted to show blacks as negative, so what's the one thing you can do to portray blacks as negative? To make them seem like they are attacking the most innocent prized possession in America at this time. Prized possession being a white woman.